Heidi, are you happy that you finally told the truth?
I got a song. Girlfriend blew up your car because you was smashing her sister. Did you meet Cassie at a Diddy freak off? Did you suck Kanye ass?
And we had to turn to one of the top lawyers in the New York City area who's actually done cases in these courtrooms and find out what everybody wants to know. Joining me right now is criminal defense attorney and managing partner of Hamilton Clark, Philip Hamilton. Phil, great to have you with us.
Always great to be with you, Lisa.
Thank you so much. One of the big questions I keep getting asked everywhere I am is, can Diddy go free? How do you answer that?
Anything is possible. Diddy could potentially go free, but if he's going to go free, the defense is going to have to continue to hammer upon the fact that this case has more to do with domestic violence than, in fact, federal sex trafficking. And if the defense can hit that home to the jury every day throughout the course of tomorrow through the rest of the trial, he might have a chance to go free. But it's going to be a very nuanced, complicated endeavor for the defense. Not easy, very much so an uphill battle.
Okay, but you're saying it's not easy for them, but a lot of people are saying all they're doing is proving domestic violence. What do they need to do? What does the prosecution need to do in order to prove sex trafficking?
Well, in order to prove sex trafficking, the prosecution has to focus on a few key elements: coercion, force, manipulation, defrauding. To the extent that they can show those elements, they can build their case and make a case for sex trafficking. So when we look at specifically the testimony that's come through from Ms. Cassie Ventura, of course, we heard a lot about force, right? And whereas a layperson might look at that testimony and say, hey, what does this have to do with sex trafficking? This has more to do with domestic violence. Well, it's a critical element, because what we do have testimony about, both from Ms. Ventura and ultimately some of the witnesses that testified today, was that there was commercial sex, right? And to the extent that you have coercion,
meaning the sex workers that they hired for these freak-offs.
Exactly. So like once you combine that element with the force, with the coercion, with the drugs, you're now starting to make a recipe for sex trafficking. Even if it isn't necessarily the strongest case, it's certainly not one that they can't prove.
So you think that the prosecution has enough to prove this?
As of right now,
yeah.
No. But if they continue building their pieces element by element, block by block, they may. We'll have to see ultimately where things are by the end of the case, how cross-examination goes with respect to a number of the remaining witnesses. But they are starting. We are only a few days in.
No, we definitely are. And then let me ask you about the RICO, the racketeering. How do you get racketeering in this whole thing? Because people are saying the main witness that they've seen is Cassie. Are they saying, is the government saying that Cassie was being trafficked by Diddy? And what about the racketeering? Explain that for us.
So it's not so much Cassie individually, right? If that was the case, then it really wouldn't be going on at this courthouse. It'd be going on at the state courthouse right across the street. Just
100
for a domestic,
Street.
100 Center Street, a typical domestic violence charge, which, based on the testimony we've heard thus far, he'd be guilty of in the state case. In this courthouse, Cassie is just simply one element upon many that the government is going to have to bring in to prove. So I think in this particular instance, it's not so much about the individual acts of violence as against her, as more as we get more of the puzzle pieces in and we get the bigger picture. And I think the bigger picture with respect to the enterprise that they're trying to prove is not much different than what we saw in the R. Kelly case, right? Where you essentially, that's the precedent for this matter, frankly. The R. Kelly case, in terms of proving an enterprise with Diddy, with his music company, and with using those apparatuses to satisfy his sexual desires.
So, for example, if they have, we've heard, drivers for his company that were hired, bodyguards, were involved in transporting any of these sex workers or involved in any booking flights for them, which they testified, they were very methodical in getting Cassie to testify about this sex worker or this individual was flown from this city to that city and flown here and flown there and naming the actual specific cities. Is that part of a RICO?
That's part of them trying to create the enterprise that Sean Combs was heading. And when I say that precedentially a lot of that stands from the R. Kelly case, it's because when he tried to appeal at the Second Circuit right next door to this building, the Second Circuit held that no, in fact, what R. Kelly was doing was running an enterprise, and that legally that could stand. The prosecution here is just collaterally and very much so in a parallel fashion doing the same thing. They're essentially saying that all those people that Diddy was using to allegedly bring people across state lines and the like is ultimately what manifests his intent to both sex trafficking, why he's guilty of it.
Okay, but and then also, what about the drug use? Because that's one thing that's different from the R. Kelly case. Yes, there was alleged drug use and alcohol there, but this is on a whole different level from what we've been hearing in some of the testimony. The amount of drugs, the type of drugs, the different cities. What role is that going to play in terms of the government proving these charges, and what kind of problems does it present for Diddy's defense team?
Two particular problems. One, for Diddy's defense team, it's critically important to the coercion element, because to the extent that these people are not in their right minds, to the extent that they are high, to the extent that they can't make decisions on their own, it's then easier to coerce them into an act, a commercial sex act, that they may not otherwise have participated in. However, the weight of that is given by the jury in terms of looking at that evidence. That's going to be on the jury to decide. But for what the prosecution has to prove, that's one critical element. I think the second critical element with respect to the drug use is the fact that you have a lot of this coming across state lines, the fact that these are predicate other criminal acts that help to make out the RICO. Because with the RICO, to your point, you can't just look at the individual acts of domestic violence. When you're looking at the drug possession, when you're looking at the trafficking of the narcotics, that also is serving as a predicate act for the potential RICO enterprise. Very complicated, but at the end of the day, definitely trying to make the point that the government is putting their building blocks together to make their case.
So you would advise people at this point, it's too early to tell, basically? Is that what you're saying?
It's too early to tell, but what they are putting into place are, number one, the elements, at least the beginning portions of the recipe that they need to make in order to prove their case. But secondly, they're making Diddy look really bad. And if there's going to be a situation where you have a couple of holdouts at the end of the case, how much empathy are they going to be able to show Diddy to continue to hold out, that he potentially gets a mistrial, or he gets them to convince other jurors to come over to his side? The worse he looks, the worse it is for him potentially in deliberations. But I repeat, not impossible.
And then what about in terms of the verdict? What needs to happen? There needs to be a unanimous verdict, or what? Explain that for us.
There needs to be a unanimous verdict on each count in order for him to be found guilty of each count. If there's one single holdout, that could be enough for a mistrial to be declared, and either for the government to have to represent their case, or potentially work out a plea negotiation with him, or do whatever it is that they're going to do at that moment, but it only takes one juror.
So the prosecution basically has to prove every single point for those 3 charges that he's facing, and the defense just has to get one juror that has serious doubts.
One juror that has serious doubts, that has the gravity with which to hold out.
And then, Phil, how important is the issue of consent in this? Because there was testimony today with Sheree Hayes, a.k.a. the Punisher, the male exotic dancer who was also a sex worker, and he was describing how Cassie seemed to enjoy having sex with him, that she seemed to be a willing partner, that he was telling by her body language. And some people were surprised. I was surprised because he was a prosecution witness, but that's something that would seem to help the defense.
No, in fact, a very good colleague of mine, Xavier Donaldson, cross-examined the Punisher, so to speak, today, and I think he did a fantastic job in laying out everything that you just said, because for the lay public, a lot of people are looking at Cassie's testimony and saying, hey, it seems to us in many respects you were a willing participant,
right,
that you were okay with this, that you went along with this for years. And for the defense, that's a fantastically great point, and one that they're going to continue to try to hammer home. But on the other side of things, the fact remains is that she also has provided testimony that builds upon the prosecution's case of the coercion, because to the extent that she is being drugged, and to the extent that she is trying to say no, but either being beaten back into it, or she is under the influence and can't really make a consensual, voluntary decision to participate or not, that's a problem for Diddy, and that's a problem for the defense team.
So what should we be watching in the days and weeks ahead? There's talk that Kid Cudi maybe come to the stand very soon. There's also talk about people who were in other freak-offs, because that's the other question I'm getting. A lot of people are saying, well, they're just talking about these freak-offs as if it's just Diddy, Cassie, and a sex worker,
right,
but there were always stories and rumors about them being bigger parties and things of that nature. What about that?
Well, let's just start with Kid Cudi, because I think therein, when I was just talking earlier about the predicate acts, when we think about the car explosion, dealing with an arson, that also is another element that's like coming into play when you talk about the RICO and when you talk about some of the issues that Diddy has with respect to that issue, right? I think in regards to other witnesses, what we need to be looking for is Are people saying not just that I was in a one-on-one intimate relationship with Diddy the way that Cassie was, but are they saying that I also was forced into doing something that I didn't want to do, or I was coerced into attending one of these parties, one of these freak-offs, and doing something I didn't want to do? I'm going to have to hear how that plays out, as surface level as that sounds as I say it. I'm going to have to hear how it plays out, and then as we can continue to have discussions about how's the case looking, I can give more analysis on that end. But that's what I'm looking to hear as we kind of move forward from today.
No, definitely, and a lot to keep our eye on. And in fact, yesterday the former personal assistant read off automatically like about half a dozen women's names, and he said these were women that he was involved in. So do you think we may see them take the stand, other women?
We shall see, but to the extent that they do, to the extent that they are either being trafficked in or coming across state lines, again, these are the kinds of elements that it's not just about Cassie and the relationship that she had with Diddy and whether or not it was consensual or not, as much as it is about the totality of the circumstances, the witnesses that are coming in and saying that they were made a part of these parties that were in many respects directed and controlled by the Sean Combs enterprise. And if at the end of the day they were able to show that they were coerced, manipulated, or defrauded into participating in these commercial sex acts, then the defense has problems that they have to continue to fight, but they have problems.
All right, well, we're going to be watching it very closely. Thank you for having us understand this, bringing your analysis to it. Attorney Philip Hamilton. I'm Lisa Evers for Fox 5. We'll see you next time.
Emotional day of testimony, another interesting day of testimony, Lisa. And I think what's on our viewers' mind as they watch this trial unfold, first was Cassie Ventura, that was all last week, and Cassie's mom was on the stand today. Highly anticipated testimony. What did she say? Interesting stuff.
Richard, it was very interesting. It was a little bit of a surprise because everybody's still talking about Cassie's testimony from last week, but her mother, Regina Ventura, got on the witness stand today and was talking about how her daughter asked her for money for help because Diddy was threatening to expose her with these sex tapes of a freak-off. Yeah. And so Regina Ventura, the mother, what she did was she got a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, on her home for $20,000 and gave that $20,000 to Diddy to try to keep him from releasing that video, that very disturbing video, I'm sure, of her daughter. And I think that was something that was just, nobody expected that, because people were like, wait a minute, she gave him $20,000? And the reason for it was all because she had cheated on him, and he wanted his money that he claimed he had invested in her from, feeding her, paying her rent, and all of these types of things. That was the number that he came up with. So that was pretty cruel.
The mom was fearing that he was going to release these sex tapes.
Yes, and that's her daughter. And, she was aware, obviously, of the situation. So there's questions about that. But it's just, when it's a mother, a parent's going to do anything for their kid.
Yeah, and I think she didn't get cross-examined either, right? So she just did her testimony and she was out.
And that was
she was
it.
on very short time.
Exactly.
On the stand. I want to just go to this male escort, the Punisher, as he's known. So he was the second to last witness to testify today. Interesting what he was talking about when he said he first encountered them. He didn't really know that this was Diddy. He didn't know who Cassie Ventura was. But then all of a sudden he was all in. After a little bit,
all in, Richard, and he was all in, and he was also really in some ways it seemed helping the defense, because he was talking about how much Cassie enjoyed the sex, that it seemed consensual to him. He even used the word, she gave me her consent, and then the prosecutor was like, how do you know that? And he said because of the way that she was moving, when they were intimate. But there was a lot to him, because he said he was in the business as a male entertainer, a stripper, for about 30 years, almost 30 years, and that also a sex worker. He didn't say that, but they would do private sessions like that. He said most of the times he was with Cassie. He didn't see Diddy or her inebriated or kind of like too high. He wasn't offered drugs. He said he was offered a drink, and he saw what he thought was marijuana there. But Richard, the real thing about him that was so fascinating was the longer that he talked, he was under cross-examination by Xavier Donaldson, one of the attorneys on Diddy's team, and he started to ask him about this, what's your business like? What are you doing, as a male entertainer? And he said mostly it's like bachelorette parties. We'll go and do things just to, super flirt. I'm going to keep it PG with the grandmothers and the mothers there, and the mother of the bride or whatever,
right,
to make it a fun evening. But he said some shocking things. He said he had about 8 to 15 encounters with Cassie and Diddy, having sex with Cassie, and that most of it, except for the last two times, was unprotected. There was no protection. So that was pretty interesting. And that he just painted more of a picture of it was a professional. He considers himself a professional, but that he was, that she seemed to totally be into it and enjoying it.
Yeah, he got paid.
He got
showed
paid.
up.
He got paid, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, except for the last time, which was the final time, and they didn't hire him again, he got $500, basically, like he said, a cancellation fee, because he had performance issues. And then he revealed, this led to a line of questioning about his journey. He said that he was going through this journey that, many men go through, and that he was writing a book about it. And the name of the book, which we couldn't catch at first, and he was asked to repeat it a couple of times before people could really understand it. We're like, what's the name of that? And he goes, the name of the book is called In Search of Freezer Meat.
Oh.
And you connect the dots there. So it was, we thought it was going to be, I thought today, coming here, that it was going to be pretty basic, but that just went, and there's a lot more to that.
Much more than basic. Another thing that stood out to me was, we talked about Combs' alleged drug use last week. He claims that he used drugs every day.
Right.
It was Cassie who said that he was overdosing. What else did he say about the drugs today?
David James, you mean?
Yes, David James.
Yeah, David James was a personal assistant. He was very close to them. He portrayed a much more hectic picture than he did yesterday. And I think there was one thing that I wanted to point out that kind of escaped me because it was towards the end of the day yesterday, but I think it was really significant.
Yeah.
Because I'm listening to the testimony, and I'm like, are they able to get what they need to prove these charges? Because they're very serious charges. And he said that one time at the Star Island, which was Diddy's Miami Beach compound, basically on Star Island there, he was standing on the dock because he was very involved. He was basically living there while he was working for Diddy, and that he was, talking with Cassie, and she just said, she goes, I had no idea how wild this whole world was, because now this was 2007 to 2009, so she'd been with Diddy for at least several years at this point.
Yeah.
And he said, well, if you're unhappy, if you don't like it, why don't you leave? And she told him, I can't leave. He controls everything. He controls my career. He controls my finances. He controls my money. He controls everything. And she just told him, I can't leave, which was pretty sad. But they needed that testimony. The prosecution needed that testimony, and I think that was one of the real reasons that he was there.
Yeah.
The drug use is going to keep coming up, and I think that we're going to be hearing a lot more about that, and I think that's going to be play a bigger role than we originally estimated.
Yeah, it seems so, because like you said, it keeps getting repeated. Speaking of that compound in Miami, so the final witness today, and his testimony continues tomorrow, was the special agent for Homeland Security. He was basically in charge of this raid back in March of last year. Tell me a little bit more about what he said today, because some of this is interesting about what they found.
Right, and he said, and he wanted, and I think they wanted to portray a very clear, because there was some criticism of that raid, particularly from extended members of the Combs family, about why did they need that big show of force? Why did they need, as he testified, as Agent Gannon, Homeland Security Investigations Special Agent Gannon, who's one of the leaders of this whole special group that they have. Right. He said that they had 80 to 95 law enforcement descend on that compound in March of 2024. And he said,
that day.
yeah, nobody can forget it. And he said the reason was because they had, their intel basically had let them know there was security there was armed security there. It was a very they have the blueprint and the schematics of the property, but he said they wanted to make sure that there was no danger to anybody, so they timed the raid. This was interesting. He testified they had a search warrant, but the search warrant, Richard, was. Are you okay?
Yes.
Okay. We're on the streets. Okay.
Yeah, we're on
and we're live. And we're live. That's why I have my sneakers on.
That'll go.
You got the fancy. You got the fancy.
I have
shoes.
my shoes. I know. I should put sneakers.
You got your fancy shoes. Anyway, he So he was basically talking about the Homeland Security, the investigations, what they were doing. He said that they wanted, usually they do these raids at about 6 o'clock in the morning. They did this one at 3:40 in the afternoon that day because he said they wanted to make sure that most of the people in the compound were out of there at the time that they went in. I thought that was interesting. And what they found, Richard, I mean,
I know.
well, they show the closet, and there's a closet. First of all, the property is gorgeous. It's I've been to Star Island, not there, but been to Star Island, and it's spectacular. It's just like one of those amazing places. So you go, they open the door. The evidence photo shows this closet in one of the rooms. There's shelves on it. So I'm like looking at it, and I'm like going, what is this, like Sean John T-shirts or package of what is this? And he describes what's in there. He describes high heels, 7-inch high platform high heels, like dozens and dozens of them. He describes lingerie, like freak off essentials, and then he says there were also assembly parts for guns. And so under questioning about the parts, he says this is the upper receiver, this is the lower receiver. These are for AR-15 semi-automatic rifles. There were bullets that were there was ammunition, and then as the agent testified that it's very simple to put it together. You put the two upper with the lower, there's a pin that you insert, and then you insert the magazine or pop the clip in, and then it's ready to go. So there was a lot of concern about that. People were kind of gasping, honestly, when they heard that. But the number of things, and then of course there was baby oil they found, there was lubricant, all of these items from the freak off that we have come to know.
Yeah, and it's this continues on. He's back on the stand tomorrow.
Right.
I know that the judge has been trying to wrap the testimony a little bit earlier now. So by 3 o'clock, you guys are coming out, and it's not as long of a day for the jury. But like you said to me, there's so much. There's so much that's coming out in one day.
Right.
It's almost difficult to follow and almost difficult to report to even the audience watching how much testimony there is.
Oh, they're moving through it, and it's like the pace of it. And one of the lawyers that I've talked to about the case, he said, just so for my own understanding, he goes, Lisa, this is not like state court. This is not like 100 Center Street, Manhattan Criminal Court. He said they are on such a tight schedule. These judges have such full dockets and so many cases that they have to keep scheduling, and they're really keeping it moving. But I thought the cool thing about what this judge Arun Subramanian, what he said when they were doing the jury selection and they were talking about the scheduling and they were kind of negotiating all of that, was he said, and think about it, Richard, we're in May. This is a time of year. There's graduations, there's weddings, there's all kinds of family events that people are having. The end of the school year for the kids, so all the plays and all of that, and just all sorts of things. And he wanted to give the jurors, which I thought was very smart, he wanted to give them time every day during the week so that they could take care of their personal affairs, bills, family stuff, work stuff, whatever, and basically stay connected with their life, but that they could still get it in. So they shortened the lunch. It's not a lunch hour; it's a lunch half hour.
Now, right?
And then he brought in. This is how smart they are about how. Just it's human nature, basically, right?
Yeah.
So to get the jurors in there on time, so nobody gets stuck on the subway or the train or whatever. They have a breakfast. They have a breakfast and coffee for the jurors starting at 8:30 every morning. Okay. So they get there at 8:30. They get breakfast, they get coffee, and then 9 o'clock they go into the courtroom and get seated. So
and it's a 6-hour day minus the half hour for lunch.
Yeah, lunch is brought in. Lunch is brought in for them too. So it's a relaxing thing because it's pretty. I mean, it's calmer this week than it was last week, but it's still hectic.
Of course, and even navigating around this area.
Yeah.
But it's good that the judge is mindful of that because it puts the jury in the right state of mind. It keeps them calm. It keeps them knowing where their meals are going to be, knowing what time they'll be able to leave that day. I think for them that can help either side. I guess it could help the prosecution, it could help the defense.
Yeah, and I think everybody appreciates. There's still a sense of, at this point in the trial, of mutual respect on both sides. Because remember, Diddy's lead attorney, Mark Agnifilo, he's a former prosecutor and one of the top prosecutors in this very district, in the Southern District here of New York. So he's very familiar with how the courts operate. Diddy's defense team, they're trying to do as much as they can. They did score points, though. The witness said the male sex worker was Shay McCrae, Hayes or whatever.
Sheree Hayes.
Sheree Hayes, thank you. I'm close.
Yeah.
He was basically talking about how Cassie seemed to be enjoying the sex with him on a professional level, and that really doesn't.
Does that really help?
Yeah,
and
I think the thing we have to remember, a couple things. I think we have to remember that, everybody is innocent until they're proven guilty, because there's been such an unprecedented barrage of publicity about this case and Diddy, and the most salacious things are the things that are the biggest headlines. And I don't want us to miss the building up of the case, of what they have to prove,
right?
Step by step. And I think that's the whole thing. Is like, it's not about whether, what your idea or anybody's idea of sex trafficking is. It's about, what does the law say? What are the requirements, point for point, that they need to prove? And that's what the jury and the jury has been seeming very interested. They're very involved. Paying attention. So we'll see.
There's a lot to prove,
but
there's still a very long way to go. I mean, we have to remind everyone, and if you haven't been following this, you're only like, a week and a half in to when the actual opening statements to the first witnesses being called. So there's so much more. No one at this point could say this is a slam dunk case or it's not.
No, and also too, remember, all the witnesses that they're calling now, excuse me, the pollen.
Yeah.
All the witnesses that are calling now are witnesses that are being brought by the prosecution. So the prosecution is bringing these people in to try to prove their case. That's why the sex worker was such a surprise today, that he was seemed to be supporting them, but he was under oath. He had to say what was the truth.
Yeah.
So then remember, we're still going to hear. We haven't heard the defense case yet, which they kind of have hinted at, saying that it's going to be, domestic abuse, not sex trafficking, drug use, drug abuse, a lot of emotional issues due to the drug abuse and that type of thing. But we haven't heard their case. We don't know who they're going to call.
Yeah, how did Diddy appear today?
He was a little bit more relaxed, pale purple crew neck sweater with the white button-down collar shirt underneath, which is like the jail uniform that. Well, it was the jail alternative uniform, the casual Friday look every day. Well, Natasha and Bianca, the third week of the trial kicked off. They picked up right where they left off on Friday with this striking and stunning testimony from two women who said that they had direct knowledge of Diddy's physical violence and physical abuse. Plus, we have new photos of evidence. Evidence photos were released today from the Fed raid last September on Diddy's Manhattan hotel room. A Louis Vuitton bag, nicknamed the Med Bag, because it contained drugs, baby oil bottles were scattered throughout the room, even in the bathroom. There were pills and pink powder that a federal agent testified was made up of illegal drugs. Former Diddy Dirty Money singer Dawn Richard was back on the stand with the defense trying to poke holes in her testimony, but she stuck to her story and said she personally witnessed Diddy beating up Cassie multiple times, and that he warned her if she told anyone, bad things could happen to her, even warning her that people who talk go missing. Also on the stand was Cassie's ex-best friend of 17 years, Carrie Morgan, who said Diddy beat her with a wooden hanger and gave her a concussion when he stormed into Cassie's home in 2018. Morgan says a month later, Cassie met her at a pizzeria in West Hollywood and said she had $30,000 for her if she would sign an NDA. Carrie Morgan testified she took the money and they never spoke again. Now the day finished off with Diddy's one of his many former personal assistants, David James, who testified that he was on call basically 24/7 to fulfill Diddy's needs, both professionally and personally, in terms of helping him to run these businesses, as well as handle personal social engagements. He said that twice that he was subpoenaed, and that was the reason that he was there in court today. We're live in Lower Manhattan outside federal court. I'm Lisa Evers, Fox 5 News. Natasha and Bianca, back to you.
I'd just like to read a statement that Cassie just prepared, as well as her husband. They're two separate statements. I'll read Cassie's first. This week has been extremely challenging, but also remarkably empowering and healing for me. I hope that my testimony has given strength and a voice to other survivors and can help others who have suffered to speak up and also heal from abuse and fear. For me, the more I heal, the more I can remember. And the more I can remember, the more I will never forget. I want to thank my family and my advocates for their unwavering support, and I'm grateful for all the kindness and encouragement that I have received. I am glad to put this chapter of my life to rest. As I turn to focus on the conclusion of my pregnancy, I ask for privacy for me and for my growing family. And then I have a statement from Alex Fine. Over the past 5 days, the world has gotten to witness the strength and bravery of my wife, freeing herself of her past. There has been speculation online surrounding how it must feel for me to sit there and listen to my wife's testimony. I have felt so many things sitting there. I have felt tremendous pride and overwhelming love for Cass. I have felt profound anger that she has been subjected to sitting in front of a person who tried to break her. So, to him and all of those who helped him along the way, please know this: you did not. You did not break her spirit nor her smile that lights up every room. You did not break the souls of a mother who gives the best hugs and plays the silliest games with our little girls. You did not break the woman who has made me a better man. I did not save Cassie, as some have said. To say that is an insult to the years of painful work my wife has done to save herself. Cassie saved Cassie. She alone broke free from abuse, coercion, violence, and threats. She did the work of fighting the demons that only a demon himself could have done to her. All I have done is love her as she has loved me. Her life is now surrounded by love, laughter, and our family. This horrific chapter is forever put behind us, and we will not be making additional statements. We appreciate all of the love and support we have received, and we ask that you respect our privacy as we welcome our son into a world that is now safer because of his mom.
Hey everybody, I'm here outside federal court. I was in the courtroom today in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. A couple of headlines you really need to know about. Cassie's mother, Regina Ventura, was in the courtroom on the stand testifying how she took out a home equity loan for $20,000 to pay off Diddy so he would not release an explicit sex video of Cassie. She also says that at that time Cassie came to her, which was 2011, it was the first time that she became aware of the abuse that Cassie was suffering at the hands of Diddy. She told Cassie, take pictures of your bruises, take pictures of your injuries, and hold on to those. So that was one thing. Another bombshell, a sex worker, a male exotic dancer named Sheree Hayes, who goes by the name of the Punisher, was on the stand for quite a while talking about how he participated in freak-offs with Cassie and with Diddy, how it was about 8 to 15 times. Most of those times they did not use protection, and he said that Diddy would basically order them what to do and how to actually do it, which he found eventually found very disturbing and very nerve-wracking, because there he is engaged in a very intimate moment with this man's woman, and this is happening. So he talked about that. He said that on about the 15th occasion, Diddy was getting very specific with him. He threw some condoms on a couch and said, use these. And he said that it was just very disturbing to him and he just couldn't perform. So after that, he was given $500, basically like a cancellation fee or thanks for your trouble, but he was never invited back to it. But the big takeaway from his testimony, well, there were two. One of the big takeaways from his testimony was he said that Cassie, and remember, he's a prosecution witness, he testified, he said Cassie appeared to enjoy it. He said that she seemed to really be into it with him. He said for him it was professional. His job was to pleasure her, and he said that this is what he was doing. The other piece of his testimony that was really important was him talking about how they handled it, that there were no drugs and that there was no alcohol involved, maybe something that might have been marijuana. There was also a Homeland Security agent that testified. He was the one that led the raid on the Miami home. He's going to be back on the stand on Wednesday morning, and there's some strong rumors that we'll see Kid Cudi take the stand this week. That's the latest here from federal court. I'm Lisa Evers. Follow me. Hey guys, I'm over here in Foley Square, just across from Federal Plaza and just about half a block away from 500 Pearl Street, the federal court where the Diddy trial is going on. I'm in between live shots now between the 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock news, and also some hits for some of the affiliates, catching up on my coffee, which I can never seem to get enough of. I just wanted to let you know what was happening today. It was in the courtroom, and it may not have been the bombshells that we heard last week, but it's very, very interesting to see the prosecution trying to build their case kind of brick by brick, and also the defense team for Diddy trying to challenge these witnesses that are coming up, because we're still in the prosecution phase of the case. It's interesting to see the defense trying to poke holes in their testimony and also to raise questions about their credibility. So what we had on the stand today, Dawn Richard resumed her testimony on the stand. The defense was cross-examining her. She is, of course, the former singer with Danity Kane and Diddy Dirty Money, and she testified that she saw Diddy physically abuse and beat Cassie on numerous occasions. She says that at one point, Diddy actually told her if she spoke about what she said, bad things would happen to her. She said he also told her that when people talk about what they've seen him do to Cassie, they go missing. So that was a pretty ominous testimony that she had. And then also we were followed by Carrie Morgan. This was interesting for a lot of other ways. Carrie Morgan was Cassie's best friend for about 17 years. Cassie testified to this last week when she was on the stand. Carrie Morgan is the one, by the way, who Cassie went to in 2016 after that horrific beating in the hotel that we all saw on the video. And Carrie had told her at that point, talk to police, had encouraged her to get out of the relationship. And Cassie ignored that and kind of got annoyed when she would suggest that. So what Carrie Morgan testified to was that in 2018, she was at Cassie's home and Diddy stormed through the door. Cassie ran into the bathroom, locked herself into the bathroom, and Diddy came after Carrie and hit her in the head with a wooden hanger, causing her to have a concussion. So Carrie said that was the final straw for her. This whole thing with Diddy, it was just too dangerous for her. So Carrie testified that about a month after that, she met Cassie at a pizzeria in West Hollywood. Cassie told Carrie, her now ex-best friend, that if she signed an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement about what had happened to her, what she had seen, because she had also witnessed Diddy beating Cassie, that she would give her $30,000 cash. So Cassie said it was money from Diddy, $30,000 in cash, and Carrie said she signed it right then and there. She took the cash, and that they haven't spoken since then. She never reached out to Cassie. Cassie never reached out to her, and then that was the end of that. So that was pretty interesting to hear. Then the final witness that was on the stand today, he basically just started, was Diddy's former assistant from 2007 to 2009. He got on the stand and testified about the duties that he had. He has a college education. He said that he wanted to be with Diddy, close to Diddy, working with him. Because remember, also in this era, this is when Sean John was really big. This was what, Diddy's businesses were thriving and expanding. Bad Boy Worldwide was expanding in a lot of different areas. But he said he wanted to, Diddy was at the Met Gala, for example, a couple of times. He said that he wanted to be Diddy's, close to Diddy, to see how he operated this conglomerate and these businesses that basically had built him into a billionaire. So David James said that he was responsible for a lot of duties. He was responsible for preparing 3 folders for Diddy every single day. One was things that he had to sign off on. It could be sketches for a design. It could be a wording for an advertisement for one of the products or one of the items, clothing items, or even songs, album covers, that type of thing. Another was Diddy's personal preferences, which would be if he was traveling to Miami, places that he might want to eat, places that he might want to visit, that type of thing. And then another one was business moves and maneuvers that he was suggesting, and that others had suggested. It was information on that. So he talked about that, but he also had to be responsible for Diddy's personal life. When Diddy had the Alpine Mansion, he was living in the Alpine Mansion. He also stayed at the compound on Star Island. He said that he had to make sure that Diddy's chef was ready to go in the morning. There were staff and chefs at these various locations, various residences that Diddy had. He really gave us kind of an inside look in the day-to-day working of Diddy's life, because one thing people were saying was, with all of the alleged drug use, how could he possibly function. He could function because Diddy, anybody that had been around him, as I was around him in 2005, interviewing him for an exclusive interview at the video, as he was about to, head out to host the MTV Video Music Awards. You could see Diddy always had tremendous drive, tremendous energy. You had to be energetic, and he testified to this. If you wanted to be his personal assistant, you had to be energetic yourself. So he testified about that. He testified about all the travel that they were doing. They would travel internationally because he's making deals in all these places too, as well as living this glamorous lifestyle. He would research various places or restaurants that Diddy might want to go. And he said that another one of his major duties was making sure that, quote unquote, Diddy was comfortable wherever he went. So this was suggesting places he might like, making sure that the people there knew in advance that he was going to be coming there, and also him interacting with Diddy's staff. He had a staff of personal assistants, a staff of bodyguards, and and also different drivers, and making sure that he got to where he needed to go, and then also giving the call time for the next day, because obviously if they were out until very, very late or very early in the morning, he had to give the staff, the bodyguards, the drivers, the chef, all of these people knowledge of what the call time was, just like they would do when you're filming a movie. They're like, your call time is this, or TV, if we're on a special assignment on location, they'll be like, Lisa, your call time is this, and then would outline what needs to happen. So it was fascinating to hear that. He's going to be back on the stand on Tuesday. We'll hear more about that. But one important thing from him was, he said the only reason he was there because he was subpoenaed twice by the prosecution.
We're going to be joined right now by Fox 5's reporter Lisa Evers outside of the courthouse. I know you spent time inside of that room learning details, witnessing the testimony from Cassie. What did we learn today? What were the big takeaways, Lisa?
Well, I think the big takeaway, Andy, was just like yesterday, we had a late afternoon bombshell being dropped by Cassie on that witness stand as she gave her testimony. She told the court that in 2012, Sean Diddy Combs had a drug overdose. Now, this was hours of testimony where she was being questioned by one of Diddy's defense attorneys about the use of drugs in their relationship, that it was part of this kind of party drug culture lifestyle. And it seems to be part of the defense's strategy to portray her relationship troubled with Sean, as a troubled one with Sean Combs, where they were both using drugs, which supposedly explains the erratic and some of the abusive behavior, according to the defense. But what she said was that they had turned to these painkillers. She had turned to them in particular after the physical and emotional after effects of these freak-offs, and that they'd be high for a couple of days and using IV vitamin drips in order to get back up so they could continue partying. And then on these drugs, and that both she and Combs had these drug addictions. But the idea, she claims that she drove him to a hospital in 2012 because he had OD'd. And that's the first that we're really hearing about anything like that, Andy. But part of the defense strategy to say, hey, were they the perfect couple? Not by a long shot. Was there a lot of abuse? Yes, Combs has admitted that, but it was domestic violence. There was a lot of drug use, but this was not sex trafficking. So they're trying to create that picture and portray that picture, Andy.
Yeah, it's very interesting because they're going through some of these text messages and graphic in nature, because they met when Cassie was 19, Diddy was 37 years old. It's very interesting. Can you detail how their relationship started and how it changed over time? Because as any relationships do, especially over a decade plus, they change. But this one was very interesting. Can you detail that at all?
Well, it is, and you're right. I mean, she met him when she was 19. She said today she fell in love with him when she was 21. She was in Miami. He had maneuvered to bring her down there for an event where he was going to be, kissed her in a hotel, and then they went out. And then, believe it or not, while she's 21, these freak-offs started happening. So the relationship evolved, but it was on again, it was off again. They also detailed the relationship she had with Ryan Leslie, a producer and a musician for about 3 years. He was 10 years her senior. That was right before she got involved with Combs. So there were a lot of relationships and what you might call, what some people call situationships, where they're on again, off again, and then it evolved. And then very soon, by the end of that first year, when she's now 22, she said that he basically took control of her entire life. That was a lot of that painful testimony from yesterday, where he controlled her money, he controlled where she lived, he controlled what she wore, he controlled what she did. Her music career, basically, which had looked promising, and at the beginning when she met him, was on the sideline, and everything was about these freak-offs. And Andy, we got an idea too of the number of them. You're talking about hundreds, she said, hundreds of these freak-offs. And then today with these text messages, you mentioned that. I think it's important to touch on that. A lot of these text messages had, "I love you, baby, I love you," going back and forth. But then the explicit ones were talking about, it was basically love and lust, and to show that she actively wanted him. And I think that was a strategy there, because remember, what they're trying to do is sow some doubt in the minds of those jurors who, after that prosecution case, which was presented with surgical precision, step by step, milestone by milestone in their relationship, to sow some doubt in their mind about the fact that she was a victim, and to show that she was a willing participant in this. And a lot of talk today about this drug use, which was rampant. She was asked, would you consider Diddy a high-functioning drug addict? And she said yes, because, the other thing that's incredible is that while he's at the height of his career, his business, his basically building his empire at this point early on in those first 5 years of their relationship, doing all these drugs, all these freak-offs, and yet he's still running these multi-million-dollar businesses and becoming the billionaire that ended up on the Forbes billionaires list. So it was very fascinating. And at times the jury looked bored, though, because the defense was, after coming after the prosecution, which was basically like rapid fire by the script and everything planned out, there was a lot of lag time. Some of the jurors looked, as if they were getting a little bit bored with it. But we'll see where it's all going, and that's not quite clear yet. But we think it's definitely according to the defense's plan that they outlined early on in the pre-trial hearings, where they were going to insist domestic violence, not sex trafficking. And we'll see which side eventually the jury decides on, Andy.
Yeah, there is mounting evidence, and this is just really the beginning, the first week of an expected to be 8-week trial. Let's get into the text messages, because like you mentioned, those are so very interesting. And they pointed to one text from Cassie to Diddy that said, quote, "I'm always ready to freak off," relating to some of these sexual escapades there taking place between the two. And it also, Cassie appeared to be upset that they took some of these out of context. Do we see her get frustrated with some of the questioning during cross-examination?
Well, I think that the whole thing was, they were trying to show that these freak-offs, which, just to remind everybody, it involved her having sex with another man while Diddy watched. And then what they added to that today, what she said, she goes, yeah, and of course the text messages too were entered into evidence saying this, that after they would have these freak-offs where he's watching her have sex with other men, she says, oh, then we would make love. And I love those sessions. I don't know if you can hear me with everything here, but I love the way we make love after the FOs, which was after the freak-offs. So that was creating a very different picture of somebody who was essentially yesterday portrayed as a sex slave who had very little say in what was happening to her. Here it is, she's saying, yes, I love this. This was our way of doing it. Now, she explained that she all she really wanted was a kind of a basic relationship with Combs, one-on-one, that type of a thing. And that clearly was not in the cards for them. And it was clearly not something that Combs had any interest in whatsoever being exclusive, because jealousy was another big theme that the defense had said they were going to show, and that was portrayed in some of those text messages too, Andy.
Yeah, that is a very good point. The jealousy point was something that I was going to bring up. Another point I want to ask you about is Cassie on the stand, as they had a kind of a deal going into this trial that she would be off the stand by Friday, that they wouldn't have to have her come back after the weekend. Do you think that is happening? Do you think it wraps up in terms of cross-examination, some rebuttal questions by tomorrow?
I think Andy, we were waiting for the judge to actually have a ruling on that, and the session today went a little bit longer, which we're taking. I came out here to do to do my various hits, but I think the session went longer today. This judge, when he can, is keeping everything on track, watching the clock, keeping things moving forward. She is very, very pregnant, by all accounts, 8.5 or even almost 9 months pregnant. I don't think they want to risk anything. It's been quite an ordeal for her emotionally. Her family was in court again, her husband, her mother, her brother, her lawyer, other supporters, and I think it's going to get nasty, but I think they want to have it wrapped up with her by the cross-examination tomorrow. And apparently there's some, I don't know if it's an actual hard and fast rule or if it is professional practice and standards, but whatever amount of time the defense, the prosecutors had with her, which was about a day and a half of 2 days, the defense is allowed the same amount of time. So that would mean that they would not have any time past tomorrow if they get started, resume the cross-examination tomorrow morning. So I really do think, and from everything we're seeing now, that the cross-examination is going to wrap up by tomorrow. I don't know whether or not they can bring in another lawyer. The other thing, Andy, I want to point out is really interesting today on Combs' side. Luigi Mangione's attorney showed up in court to show support for Combs. Of course, she's married to Combs' lead attorney, Mark Agnifilo, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, but she was there, and Diddy looked happy to see her. So we'll see what happens tomorrow, who's going to continue with that cross-examination. But they're really, they didn't really have any like gotcha moments with Cassie in terms of catching her in inconsistency or anything like that, but we'll see what happens tomorrow. Andy?
All right. My last question before I let you go, Lisa, because this has been so very insightful into day 4 of this case, but as we watched during open statements, it's not only about what they say, but who says it in terms of the lawyer that presents some of this. And it was interesting to look at the cross-examination, right, as it was Anna Esteveo there cross-examining, asking questions, chit-chatting with Cassie, getting comfortable with her. How did you view that? What was your perspective on having her be the person to cross-examine Cassie?
Well, I think they definitely, it was clear to everybody, they definitely wanted a woman to do it. They definitely wanted a woman, a woman to approach her. And she was being very, I don't want to say laid back, because Anna, the defense lawyer, she was, of course, very, very involved. But in terms of the approach with her, it was much more conversational. But she was also, there were a lot of objections by the prosecution to the way she was asking questions. And then we learned also, too, from sources that early this morning, the defense had failed to meet the request. There was an April 27th deadline for them to supply the prosecution with all of the evidence that they would be presenting in court, like all of these text messages, and apparently that didn't happen. They missed that deadline. So yesterday the judge had ordered them to get them to the prosecutors as soon as possible, basically ASAP. And then there was a dump of reportedly thousands of text messages, or a lot of information for prosecutors to go through at about 3 a.m. this morning. That's how close to the wire the defense is playing it. So that typically is not a good indicator of things that have been well thought out. But on the other hand, defense attorneys will say, we don't want to tip our hand with the prosecutors too much in advance. So that might have been what was behind all of that. But the fact of having a woman do the cross-examination was critical, because the last thing they wanted to do, Cassie is a tremendously sympathetic figure. Her courage, Andy, think about that, just going up there and talking about these like the lowest moments of her life, and admitting to what she did, which is not anything any woman would really ever want people to know. And doing it in open court with the eyes of the world on her, that takes a lot of guts. And of course, the other bombshell from yesterday, we have to remind people, was the $20 million that she got as the settlement from Combs. She was asked another question, Andy, that was really, really important, that everybody in the court was kind of like going, whoa. Anna asked her, the attorney asked her, would you say that your lawsuit ruined Sean Combs? And then there was an objection, and then there was a rephrasing, and Cassie said, yes, it did, because it basically did. I mean, his empire, his reputation, everything is totally a 180 from what it was before that November 2023 lawsuit was filed, Andy.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Of course, Cassie motioning that about it, but it's obviously a conversation about is Diddy ruined Cassie's career and now Cassie potentially ruined Diddy. So it's a very interesting argument being made there in court. And we just saw the support system for Sean Diddy Combs, his kids leaving the courthouse just moments ago. Lisa Evers, I appreciate your time, though. Great insight, as always. Day number 4 wrapping up there in New York City. We appreciate it.
Hey, everybody. I just wanted to give you a little update. It's the lunch break here at federal court in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. This morning, Cassie Ventura was back on the witness stand again, her 3rd day being here inside the courthouse. And she was questioned by the defense team, by Combs' defense team. They had her read text messages between her and Combs, where she was telling him that she loved him, where she was telling him that she enjoyed making love with him one-on-one after these freak-offs, and that was a special time, and then a lot of other messages going back and forth. One of the things that the defense is obviously trying to do, in fact, they said it early on in the pretrial proceedings, was that they will show that this was a personal relationship, a troubled, toxic relationship, long-standing, where there was a lot of drug abuse, drug use, substance abuse, and that this contributed to the behavior that we saw, the attack on Cassie in that hotel room video, which has already been shown on several different days here this week in the courtroom to the jurors. So she was asking Cassie about, did she love him? How she felt about him. She was reading also very explicit messages from Cassie to Combs and Combs to her about how they wanted each other sexually and in very explicit terms and that type of thing. And then apparently trying to portray this image of this relationship. And it for a lot of people, it was kind of boring the way that the defense attorney was trying to present this. There were a lot of lulls. They didn't seem too well prepared. And we'll see what happens. But in a way, after everything that we've heard this week from Cassie talking about the abuse, the beatings, the degradation, the threats, all of that type of thing, this almost makes what she was saying earlier even more poignant and even more impactful, because she was really in love with this guy. And she said it. She was in love with him. She fell in love with him shortly after her 21st birthday, and then was subjected to all of this. So we'll see where this goes today. She's expected to be on the stand the rest of today, Thursday, and then also on Friday. But they will figure out what the limitation is of her testimony time on the witness stand under defense cross-examination, because they have to match the time that the prosecution had with the defense. But this is very, very different from these surgically precise strikes that the prosecution was making with receipts, with names, with evidence, all of that type of thing. And we'll see what happens. The defense says they have some evidence this afternoon that they'll be presenting, and we'll see what that turns out to be. But just wanted to give you a little update back here, back here in federal court. Allergy season, back here in federal court, and I'll have an update for you later on this evening, okay? Take care. Hope you're having a great day.
How's the family feeling this video then?
How's the Combs family feeling? I have no idea. You'd have to ask them. Yeah. Good morning. She's doing well. She had a restful night. She's ready for cross-examination, and we're very confident that she's going to do perfectly. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Everybody's talking about the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking and racketeering trial. And the prosecution's star witness and Diddy's ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, back on the witness stand for cross-examination this morning.
This, of course, after a second day of emotional testimony yesterday, caused the defense to say they're changing their strategy going into today. Fox 5's Lisa Evers has been in the courtroom for much of the testimony, joins us this morning. First of all, before we get going, Lisa, exactly what is the process to get inside the courtroom that you're lined up outside the courthouse today for?
Roe and Kurt, I can tell you that there has never been a more disorganized system for dealing with the media. There's international media here all over the world, many different countries. Many of the major American stations have multiple teams of crews and also reporters and production assistants. And then there was a process. The marshals have everything under control. The marshals police division, which handles the security inside, they have everything under control, but they weren't deciding who was getting in, who was not getting in. There was no specific credential for this particular trial as there was, for example, in the R. Kelly case in the Eastern District in Brooklyn. So they're trying their best, but clearly there was not the type of plan that we're used to seeing at criminal court, where they give you a token if you're allowed to go in, and then you can give that token to another person of your crew. So it's been a real challenge. I've been up at 4:30 every morning this week. My production assistant, Brendan, Mio, everybody's been trying to use every contact that we have so that we can get in that courtroom. But I have to tell you, yesterday it was something I've never seen before.
Okay, so hopefully you get in smoothly today. What was it about yesterday that made you say, I've never seen this before?
Well, you have on one side, you have Cassie Ventura's husband. Her mother was there. Her mother, who apparently was urging her to write a book as she was learning of this ordeal that her daughter had been going through for more than a decade. Her brother was there. There were other supporters there. Her attorney, Douglas Wigdor, who was the one that filed that initial civil suit that ended up getting $20 million for Cassie and that settlement in November of 2023, he was there with her. So she had a whole row. And then on the other side, Sean Combs' mother was there. His 3 oldest sons were there. The 3 girls who walked out on Tuesday because of the graphic testimony from the male escort, male sex worker, they were not there in court. But when Cassie walked in, every eye in the courtroom turned to her except for Diddy. He was looking straight ahead like a statue. She walks down the center aisle like a queen. She's about 8.5 months pregnant, which is what is the guesstimate, the best guesstimate, but very visibly pregnant, stunningly gorgeous, in 3 or 4 inch stilettos with a long coat, and just holding her head up high, not looking at anybody, taking the witness stand, and just really controlling the situation in terms of how she wanted to present herself. But I have to tell you, from what we could see Combs from like a 20 or 30 degree angle. He was looking at her the whole time, not moving, not making any real movements that we could see because, we're looking at his back. But it was extremely tense, and of course that tension got ratcheted up by the end of the day when we heard even more shocking revelations, which a lot of people did not expect to see coming.
Okay, so the jury saw some pictures of the freak-off, and also they saw the video of Sean Diddy Combs attacking Cassie. How do you think the defense is going to handle that? Because apparently there's rumor now they're changing strategy.
Well, it'll be interesting, Ro, to see how they are changing strategy, or what strategy they could possibly give. Because that, and also too, let's point out yesterday that video again, a clip from the hotel beating, and the defense has been from the very beginning two things. They said this is a consensual sexual relationship, a toxic one, admittedly one where there was substance abuse on both sides, and that was one of the revelations that Cassie detailed yesterday. She said she turned to opiates after these freak-offs, hundreds of freak-offs, about one a week, lasting anywhere from 1 to 4 days, where they were high on ecstasy, they were high on coke. It was just this marathon of drugs, no eating, very little food that was available, and that she needed the opiates in order to calm down, in order to, as she put it, numb herself and disassociate herself from this horror that she was going through. But, Ro, you're asking about the defense, and the defense has said, okay, this is domestic abuse. Mr. Combs apologized on it, on his Instagram that was taken down for this, acknowledged the beating, acknowledged that it was him. But the fact of the matter is, it's more than domestic abuse, and sitting in court every day, which has been a phenomenal experience in terms of seeing the process and also seeing the actual evidence, because as you guys know, at the end of the day, this is going to come down to not what we read 2 months ago, not what somebody said on a blog, not what photos surfaced by X, Y, or Z celebrity, but what is presented in court. The prosecution has been methodical, almost with surgical precision, in presenting the stepping stones that they need, according to the defense attorneys that I've talked to who do these RICO sex trafficking cases here in federal court. The defense has been methodical in putting the elements they need. They need to show force. They They need to show that she was coerced. That was very clear when Roe mentioned the pictures of the beating. She showed pictures of where she was beaten. The gash in her head when she said he shoved her into a bedpost in a hotel room after a freak off because he didn't like the way he was going. His own defense attorney, Mark Agnafilo, said, yes, Mr. Combs has a high temper and it would get out of control when he would get really angry. But they're building these elements they need. The interstate trafficking and prostitution. The prosecutor the day before yesterday, on the first day of the stand, and also a couple times yesterday, asked her, these male sex workers, were they flown in? Oh, yes, this one came from L.A., this one came from here. So it'll be interesting to see what the defense is going to come up with, because not only now do they just have the abuse and the sexual abuse and this physical abuse and these assaults and the trafficking, but they have all these elements for this very serious these very serious crimes that could keep him behind bars for the rest of his life if he's found guilty. Rowan,
it's going to be explosive today. Lisa, thank you for being our eyes and ears in the courtroom. Okay. We appreciate it.
The federal courthouse of the Southern District of New York. It's 500 Pearl Street. That's the exact address. And inside this courtroom on the 26th floor, there was intense testimony today by Cassie Ventura. She took the stand for a second day, walking into the court almost with a regal attitude, very pregnant, wearing a long form-fitting charcoal gray sweater dress with a black maxi coat over it and very high heels, which she just glided into the court, looking straight ahead, not looking at the side of the courtroom where the Combs family and some of the supporters who have shown up for Sean Diddy Combs were actually seated. So all throughout the day, the intensity kept building and building and ratcheting it up. Yesterday, we learned of how she met Sean Diddy Combs. We learned of the early days of their relationship, of how she knew him for a while. He gave her a record deal, and then it became a personal relationship, which quickly devolved into these freak-offs, these sessions where she would be hiring male escorts to have sex with her while Sean Diddy Combs allegedly watched from another part of the room or the hotel suite that they happened to be at. So yesterday it was basically a young naive. She was talking about when she was 19, when she was 20 years old, 21, a young naive woman meeting this superstar who was at the height of his power, at the height of his fame, and that how she just became involved in these freak-offs, not so much because she wanted to herself, but because she wanted to please him. She wanted to make him happy. And then gradually, but very steadily and very at a rapid pace, she found out that if she did not participate in these freak-offs, he would get angry with her, and that she said there were beatings, allegedly, and that he would also punish her by taking her electronics away. So today we basically pick up in the middle of their relationship. She's describing it, how he's becoming more controlling. They showed evidence in court, photographs of Cassie with bruises on various parts of her body, a big gash over her eye where she says she was shoved into the headboard of a bed at one of the hotels after one of these freak-offs, and that also the emotional toll that these freak-offs were taking on her. She wasn't able to pursue the music career that she had been promised and that she had wanted to do early on. And she was also talking about the emotional toll on her. She wanted to have a one-on-one relationship with Sean Diddy Combs, and she said she was starting to feel that all he wanted her for was these freak-offs, which he would verbally assure her that was not the case. But she said they were happening at the rate of about one a week, sometimes lasting from 1 to as many as 4 days. They were drug fueled. She was taking ecstasy, they were taking cocaine, they were taking mushrooms. And then to come down on it, what she revealed today was that she developed an opiate addiction. She was taking opioids in order to calm herself down, and also to numb herself. And she said that's what was happening. She just had to numb herself from the entire experience, and in her words, she used the word disassociate from what was happening because it was just so painful. She also testified that over the years of her relationship with Sean Diddy Combs, she developed hundreds of freak-offs. She developed ongoing UTIs, urinary tract infections, which even though they were being treated and even though very painful, she had to continue doing these freak-offs. And then she also said she developed sores in her mouth from the activity that was going on, oral sex and things of that nature, baby oil, all kinds of things happening at these freak-offs with her and another man. And then she named at least 12 of the escorts, the male escorts. Their pictures were shown in open court. And then when it came time to talk about some of the intimidation that she felt, she said that Diddy, when she would hesitate about participating in the freak-offs or tell him, I can't do this anymore, she says he allegedly threatened to expose her with videos. He had taken videos of these freak-offs and shame her publicly with the videos of those freak-offs. So today what happened was the judge ruled that the images, the still images from these freak-offs could be shown to the jury, which they were, and very graphically, so graphic they must have been that one of the jurors basically put her hand to her chest and was like almost gasping when she took a look at them. They were not shown to in open court. They took great precautions with the video screens to make sure that people could not be seeing them from any surveillance cameras in the courtroom or anybody in the overflow courtroom. That was completely blocked and that they were completely private. Then Cassie went on to testify about how the relationship, she was getting to the point where she needed to end it. She wanted to end it, and that one of the big bombshell pieces of testimony that came out of today was she said that 2018 she met Combs for what was supposed to be a nice dinner to basically end things amicably, which is what she thought was going to happen. They had a lovely dinner, she said, and then they went back to her house, which was not too unusual. And then as soon as they were back in the house, she said that Combs forced her to have sex, that she was sexually assaulted by him at that particular point. So she also talked about the emotional abuse and trauma that she went through. She said that this created, she felt degraded, which she had mentioned also yesterday, but that this was taking a serious emotional toll on her. All of the drug use was definitely taking a toll on her. She became very, very depressed. And then after this alleged sexual assault, she says in 2023, when she was with her current husband, Alex Fine, who was originally Diddy's personal trainer and at one point her personal trainer, they had already had 2 kids at this point. She's pregnant now with her 3rd child. That she said to her husband Alex, she said, I just can't do this anymore. She goes, you can handle the kids without me. And she was about to go out of the house and into the street to supposedly throw herself in front of a car or to end her life in some way, and that he stopped her and he saved her. And she said that basically that what this was all about for her was her unloading all of this baggage that she was still carrying from all of these years of alleged abuse, physical, emotional, and who knows, a lot of physical things too that may still be occurring for her. And it was very traumatic. She broke down crying, talking about the sexual assault. Up until that point, she'd kept her composure, even though you could tell that it was very difficult for her to say this and to speak her truth in open court like that. And then one of the other big revelations that came out from today was that everyone remembers that settlement that was done in 24 hours between Cassie's attorney, Douglas Wigdor, and this was in November of 2023 when she filed the civil suit. It was settled within 24 hours. She says apparently it was for $20 million for her not to publish a book that she had been starting to write. So that was confirmed, the amount. There was a lot of talk about the speculation of how much she received in order to, in order to settle that suit. The amount was $20 million. So that's the latest here from the federal courthouse. I'm Lisa Evers. Please follow us, Fox 5 NY YouTube. Please follow me at Lisa Evers on Instagram and X. Lisa Evers Live on TikTok, and we'll be back again soon with you with more updates. But a very eventful day. Oh, and I should mention, looking to tomorrow, Thursday, what's happening Thursday morning is the defense team will have their shot at cross-examination of Cassie. So that's expected to be very tense as well. So that's the latest from here. Have a wonderful night. I'll see you tomorrow. Hey guys, I'm over here in Foley Square. I just had to step away from the courthouse because there's just so much chaos and so much going on over there. Basically, I was in the courtroom today for the start of week 2 of the trial of Sean Diddy Combs' federal racketeering and sex trafficking case. Very, very interesting. They got a lot done. They got the jury impaneled. The jury was sworn in. They were given all of their orders by the judge and all the rules and everything that they have to abide by. Number 1 is do not discuss the case with anybody. Do not go on any social media sites. Do not go on the internet looking for stories about Sean Diddy Combs. all of that type of thing. But here's the big deal, and here's what really happened that is just making a lot of news that I want you to know about. Hear from me. They did the opening statements, basically the opening statement by the prosecution, the lead prosecutor, Maureen Comey, who is the daughter of the former FBI director. She was basically saying that Sean Combs committed crimes for 20 years, and we will prove that he used his business empire, his employees, his close inner circle, in order to conduct these crimes and to commit these crimes of trafficking, interstate prostitution, and so forth. So that was her thing. Then Tenny Garagos, she's the daughter of the famous defense lawyer, Mark Garagos, who you've probably seen in some of the documentaries. He's been doing a lot of media and stuff too. He's been in court as well. She was basically saying that, listen, we admit that Sean Diddy Combs was an abuser. He's taking responsibility for domestic violence. She did. This was the opening statement, so she didn't give a lot of specifics, but that's what she was saying. But and that basically he's guilty of domestic abuse. He is a man who likes to have many women at the same time. He likes baby oil. That is not a federal crime. That was kind of the tone and the tack that she was taking, the direction with what her comments were. But the real explosive stuff came in the testimony. So the first witness was the guard at the hotel, the Intercontinental Hotel, in May of 2016. That horrific video that we all saw of Cassie being beaten in the hallway. He was the security guard who came up there afterwards and helped Cassie get out of the hotel and get away from Combs for the moment. So basically, he walked her back to the room. He kept Combs away from her so she could grab her bag and her phone and get out of there, which at that particular moment she did. So that was his testimony. That was pretty straightforward. They tried to poke holes, the defense tried to poke holes in it, but what could they really say? The guy is a law enforcement officer now. He files reports. He talked about the incident report. But the really explosive testimony came from a male strip show manager, who some are calling an escort, named Daniel Phillip. So he testified that he got a telephone call for a booking for a bachelorette party. You know how they have the strippers for the bachelorette party for the ladies, get the, turn up the temperature, get everybody all excited, have a lot of fun. He gets to the suite at the Gramercy Park Hotel. This is the first encounter he had with Cassie and with Combs. And he gets there, and instead of a bachelorette party, Cassie answers the door in red lingerie with a red wig, sunglasses, red platform shoes, and basically says, I'm sorry if you were misled. This was just for me and my husband. And he didn't know who the husband was, and he didn't really know who she was at that particular point. So he goes in, he testifies. This is everything he's saying on the stand at court. He testifies that he went in there. There was a table, it was a suite, it was in the living room, that they gave each other baby oil massages, always a lot with the baby oil. And he said Mr. Combs really liked the baby oil, and that she asked him if he wanted to have sex. He had sex with her, and he said there was a man in the corner wearing a white bathrobe, a red bandana covering the lower part of his face, and a hat on. And he was there watching in the corner, and he was pleasuring himself. I'm going to keep it PG here, but you know what I mean. So anyway, so that was the first time they were together. Then as he's leaving the hotel, she gives him several $1,000s cash. He goes outside, and then about an hour later, she calls him back and says, hey, can you come back? So this time he comes back, and they go through, round 2 or 22, whatever it was. And then this continues. So back to Daniel Phillip. So he testified that this was the first of many, many experiences that he had with Cassie. Of course, he later found out that the man was Sean Combs. He said she always set up the meetings, these encounters, and whatever you want to call them, experiences. She always set them up. She's the one that always paid him, and that these went on, and that it stopped at a certain point when he saw Combs hit her, and that was too much for him. Now, while this testimony is happening in the courtroom, Sean's Diddy's oldest kids were there, along with his mother and the 3 daughters, Chance and Delilah and Jessie. they walked out of the courtroom because they kept talking about how many times he was pleasuring himself. And this is coming after they showed the hotel video, you know, the hotel attack scene video. So that it was a lot for the daughters, I think, and they walked out of the courtroom. But it was a lot. It was a lot for me even just to listen to it, because you hear it over and over and over again. So it's going to be real interesting to see how this shakes out. Cassie's expected here in court on the stand this week. You guys probably know she's very pregnant, and is the key part of their whole case. Without Cassie, the feds really have no case. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there, and I'll keep you posted. Follow me, please. If you want to know the latest, get alerted when I'm going live. I'm going to try to do more lives. In the courtroom, it really is bad because we cannot even bring phones or laptops or iPads or anything into the courtroom. So I'm kind of going a little stir crazy not having my phone for that long and all this information coming out. So I'm on my second notebook already, and this is only the second week. But anyway, that's the latest here from court, and just follow me, spread the word, and I'll try and post as much as I can, okay? Love you guys, bye. So you see the media there, that's the area that's been set up for the media. This is after court here today on Tuesday, and you see the black Sprinter van right there. The kids just got into that, and U.S. Marshals have the area cordoned off so that they're not being approached as they're walking down there, but clearly they have to face this every single day outside federal court. This is the line that's already forming to get into court for the Diddy trial for tomorrow morning. We got the line dudes here. We got your important service for the media and everybody. And that's what's going on here. Now, Sean Diddy Combs sat with his defense team, paying close attention to the answers given by potential jurors. He walked into court wearing his approved trial uniform of sweatshirt and dark slacks, or sweater, shirt, and dark slacks, and was clearly taking an active role in the selection. He listened carefully to what was said, taking notes and passing notes to his attorneys. They were questioned by Judge Arun Subramanian, who told them they will need to be able to devote 8 weeks, 2 full months to the trial at the minimum. The initial group of 700 has been whittled down to just dozens. In the first day and a half, 25 people made the cut to be in the final round. It's getting down to the nitty-gritty in terms of the jurors, and one of the reasons for the quick pace is the questionnaires they filled out last week, says prominent jury and trial consultant Faye Honig. Here's what she had to say.
This is one of the benefits of a juror questionnaire. The attorneys and trial teams have already had about a week with these jurors. So they've already submitted a list of who they know is not going to sit on the jury, and they know who's going to show up. So there already is some background information that they've been able to collect.
Now, dozens of jurors have already been dismissed for a variety of reasons, from family and work commitments to their opinions about the case. They are on track to finish this jury selection by tomorrow night, which was the judge's initial goal. We're live in Lower Manhattan. I'm Lisa Evers, Fox 5 News.